also, right? There we go. Good morning. I want to begin by acknowledging that we reside in what was historically the homeland of Indigenous people who were dispossessed of their land. I want to acknowledge and express my gratitude to the Tongva, Tataviam, and Chumash peoples, past and present and emerging, as traditional caretakers of this land in the Los Angeles Basin. I also want to invite all of you to acknowledge the ancestral people of the land where you are by sharing their names in the chat. Thank you. Welcome to the first panel of the first Women Who Submit Submission Conference, Demystifying Top-Tier Submissions. Sponsorship for this event comes from Natalie Diaz and Arizona State University Center for the Imagination in the Borderlands. I'm Tisha from the leadership team, and I will serve as tech support today. Once the panel begins, my camera will be off, so if you have technical difficulties, please message me privately in the chat. You can also use the chat to send positive feedback and support to the panelists and the moderator. At the end of the panel, there may be time to take a few questions from the audience. And at that time, you can put your questions in the Q&A window at the bottom of the Zoom webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tisha. So my name is Lituo Huang, and I'll be moderating this panel. While Women Who Submit members meet every month with the goal of sending our writing to literary journals, our annual submission blitz in September focuses specifically on sending our best writing to top-tier literary journals. According to the VITA count, these journals have historically neglected the voices of women and non-binary writers. Women Who Submit's annual submission blitz is a nationwide effort to dismantle the patriarchal forces at work in the publishing industry and bombard them with so many submissions by women and non-binary writers that they must publish some of us. Today we will chat with three writers, Anita Gill, Cynthia Guardado, and Hazel Kight Witham, who have successfully placed work in top-tier journals. So Anita has placed Hair in the Iowa Review, Cynthia In Exchange for My Absence in Poetry, and Hazel The Power of Story in The Sun. I prepared a few topics for our conversation, and as Tisha mentioned, there will be an opportunity for audience questions at the end. So I'll introduce myself briefly. I've been a member of Women Who Submit for almost 3 years, and I write fiction and poetry. I'm working on my first novel. I wrote a lot as a kid, but I took a break as an adult until just about 3 years ago when I started up again. I would consider myself an emerging writer. I've been submitting for about 2.5 years, thanks to Women Who Submit. I have not made it into any top-tier journals yet, but a recent publication of mine that I'm really proud of is a microfiction that was in the first issue of the new VITA Review. As a writer, I'm usually trying to work something out, like externalize my feelings and experiences, or take revenge on my enemies through my writing. So panelists, please introduce yourselves. We'll start with Anita.
Okay, good morning. My name's Anita, and I'm a writer mostly focused in nonfiction work, specifically memoir. I do dabble a little bit in fiction and writing satire. I've been writing for about 10 years, but I haven't been a really serious writer until maybe the last few years. And I think I joined writing Women Who Submit in around 2017 or so too. So about 3 years for me as well. And I've been submitting pretty seriously since joining Women Who Submit. I decided to not really worry about submitting until I had finished an MFA. And before I had gotten into a top-tier journal, I was really glad to get into like McSweeney's Internet Tendency and Hippocampus. So my writing is humorous, but slowly moves into the more sincere, deeper things. One of my mentors says I'm like Irish cream coffee. Like I'm really sweet on the top, and then I get into like the alcohol, dark stuff at the bottom.
Thank you so much, Anita. Cynthia?
Hi, I'm Cynthia Guardado. I've been, or I'm a writer. I write poetry, and I guess I've been writing poetry for 18 years, but I only consider sort of what I call like my awakening, the amount of time I've been writing poetry, which is about from 2009, when I really started to write stuff that was really true and important to me. And I've been submitting since about 2009. And I actually wrote in exchange for my absence in 2010. One of the things that at this stage in my career, I have a book out. I have about, I don't know, maybe about, I actually don't submit a lot, which is like one of my really things I try to push myself with. And probably most of my submissions happen when I submit, like motivated by women who submit. Sorry, I'm like, I don't know why I'm nervous today. I'm nervous this morning. But you all saw my video, right? I can talk on camera. Other publications I'm proud of are, I was published in Huizache and the Accentos Review. And typically all my publications are in Latinx editor-run magazines. So that's a big deal for me. That's usually where I fit. That doesn't mean that's the only place I'm sending out, but it's usually the only place that's publishing me because my work is so specifically culturally oriented to my experience. So I think that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, for that. Hazel?
Hi, good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where we are. My name is Hazel Kight Witham. I write creative nonfiction, poetry, and then every November with my high school students, we do National Novel Writing Month. This coming up will be my 12th year doing that. So I've got a collection of crappy first drafts on novels that I dream of someday, like actually deciding that some of those need to get out in the world. I'm a teacher, and I think that my writing life was really born when I took a summer workshop for teachers at the UCLA Writing Project, and I really found my love of writing there. I went on to get an MFA at Antioch, and that was in creative nonfiction. I really loved the community. I mean, it felt like just being at writing camp with amazing other people and minds. And then I began submitting while I was doing my MFA. And then when I joined Women Who Submit like 4 or 5 years ago, I can't exactly remember when it was, I started to get more intentional about my submission process. And I also want to say, like, I think one of the biggest things that has kept me writing amid like becoming a mother and still having this full-time job as a teacher has definitely been the community that I found. I was really lucky to form a writing partnership with a dear friend who's also a Women Who Submit leader, Noriko Nakata. Hello, Noriko, I know you're out there. And we began writing together in the mornings before heading off to our teaching gigs. And that time and space and continual check-in was vital. And we've really kind of kept each other accountable and cheered each other on. And then Women Who Submit has just been one more place where it feels like a place to celebrate, a place to, you know, talk about how challenging the process is, to like air our self-doubts and like really set concrete goals and keep ourselves going. And during pandemic, like the Saturday check-ins have been a space where I've just felt so held. And it's been really powerful to have that community. And I don't think I would have made it through nearly as intact without that regular community.
Yeah, I know that Saturday check-in has been really vital for a lot of members of Women Who Submit. Hazel, when did you attend the writing project?
In 2004, I believe, or
Okay.
2005. Yeah.
So that's really interesting. It seems like most or all of you, the piece that you wrote that was eventually published in the Top Tier magazine you wrote it pretty early on after you started writing seriously or intentionally again. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
For me, it was a while into my writing life when I began the piece that ultimately got to the Sun. But the piece that I first published in a really significant literary magazine was in 2009. I published an essay that I'd worked on during my MFA program in Bellevue Literary Review. Mm-hmm. And I had a name a mentor who had been published there. So I was able to use that in my cover letter. And then I got that essay submitted. And that was actually what then led the Sun to contact me. It was like one of my most like shocking moments as a writer to be, solicited for submission after they had read that on the Bellevue Literary Review website. And so the contact at the Sun, Colleen, she then said, send us your work. And I then proceeded to send them work, once a year, twice a year, pass. Ultimately, what I got published was an interview. And I feel like it was kind of a sideways in to that top tier journal, because I think I had been submitting essays and poetry. And then when I decided to approach it from an interview, which I just had started noticing as I was reading the Sun, there were a lot of the same people doing the interviews. And so I decided that, there was somebody I wanted to interview and I wanted to try that approach. And that was ultimately what worked for me.
I see. Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit, actually, the process of everyone's submission. But Anita, when did you write the piece that was eventually published in the Iowa Review relative to when you started writing more seriously?
From about 2016 to 2018, I was in a low residency program at Pacific University up in Oregon. And so it was in the middle of that program where I was just in a nonfiction focus with my mentor. And she was like, dig deeper. You really need to be interrogating yourself. So I started just exploring. And so I would say it was probably around 2017 or so. And then in 2018 is when I finished and I had my thesis. And when I had my thesis book for them, she told me this was the essay I needed to start sending it out immediately. And yeah, actually Iowa Review had a contest and it was just one of the first places I submitted to, thinking at the time, I just wanted to submit as much as possible because I had just started the West Side LA chapter of Women Who Submit. And I wanted to be a model for them of just look at me submitting, look at me getting rejections. And so they were actually one of the first places I submitted to, around 6 other places at the same time, just on a similar, like a blitz. And thinking, put this out into the ether and, I'll be fine getting that rejection, but look, everyone, I tried. That was my feeling.
It sounds like you submitted it sort of on principle, so you could demonstrate your adherence to the mission, right, of Women Who Submit.
I felt really good about the piece. It was a hard piece to write because it's a relationship with me and my mother. And it's one that is about race. I am a mixed race woman. My father is a North Indian man, and my mother is white. And my mother raised me to believe I was white. So, and I love my mother very much, but this was a one moment where I wasn't seen fully with her. So in writing this piece, it took a lot. It was a lot of interrogation with myself, and also trying to portray my mother on the page as someone who is wonderful, funny, but also has her own conflicts. So when I had that and I knew it was ready, I wanted to give it the space it deserved. And I want to say that Women Who Submit has a fantastic blog, and there's so many great articles and blog posts on there that if you have a piece that you've really been working on that you really, really love, like it's just your heart and soul's in it, you owe it to yourself to really put that out there, to try for those places that you really want to see it in. And they might say no, but at least you've tried. So when I got it, and it was a contest. So I found out I was a finalist, and I was like, great, I'm probably going to be a finalist and I'm not going to get in. That was my opinion. And I thought, well, that's really cool to be at this point. But at the time I didn't know who the contest judge was. And it was Casey Lehman, who right before Heavy came out. And I didn't know who he was. I apologize. Okay, please, no hate mail, please. But I didn't know really who he was yet. And when I found out it was selected, I was just floored. And then his memoir came out, and I immediately bought it. And then I realized the entire book is a love letter to his mother. And I realized that I had hit him in a way that had made him select that as the winner. And I would never have thought. And it was just irony of ironies, because at one point he was living in the same neighborhood as me growing up. And I found that out in the book. So, I mean, it really was taking something that was very personal that I really loved, and putting it out there, and like the right people will read it and really enjoy it.
Sounds like it was something that you really believed in when you put it out there. Cynthia, what was your intention in submitting to Poetry Magazine? As you said earlier, you know, most of the pieces that have been published are in journals with Latinx editors. So is that where you choose to submit now? And what was your process when you submitted to poetry back in 2010, I think?
Oh, no. I think I've submitted to poetry a bunch of times, but that submission was from last year, from 2019.
Oh, you wrote it in 2010.
I wrote the poem in 2010. So that poem actually has been rejected so many times. The one that was published by Poetry Magazine, I've sent it out quite a bit because it's a poem I really believe in and I really love. And so even as I've sent it over the years, I've really done only micro edits to it. And part of that has been because I really believed in the poem and what the poem was doing. But I've always been sending to top tier magazines the entire time, and I always get usual responses no, right? So this, I feel like just because it's called poetry, it's the biggest magazine, right, for publishing in poetry, it feels, right? That's why I kept sending there. Not really, I guess just for, I've been thinking about this. I said this in my video, like, why do we do it, right? Why do we submit to top tier magazines? And really just because everyone's always told us, like, that's the dream, right? Like, to be in these big magazines with a wide readership, right? To be in those magazines. And that's really the only reason why I submitted there, right? Like, I don't have a personal love relationship with Poetry Magazine myself, right? And I don't necessarily always connect with the things that they're publishing. But it's more about that goal, that ultimate goal, right? Of I just really wanted to be in this top tier magazine, or many of the ones, you know, that I've been rejected from many times.
So like a sense of almost like finally winning after having been rejected so much by these like gatekeepers.
Yeah.
I see. Hazel, what about you? I know that you said your piece was actually solicited by the Sun. So I guess maybe the question is, what made you submit to the Bellevue Review?
So I had been working on a memoir during my MFA about my own experience with bipolar disorder, the loss of my cousin to suicide, and my grandmother's hospitalizations where she received electroshock therapy. So I had this braided memoir, and I decided to take a piece of that and talk about a visit I made to Texas to try and kind of retrace the steps that my grandmother had gone on when she was getting treatment. And so I wrote the piece. I knew it had this like mental health, angle. And one of my mentors, Emily Rapp, she had just published in Bellevue Literary Review. And so she encouraged me to submit there. I used her name in my letter and I got accepted. And I had such a great experience working with the editor. I mean, it was really the first time I was getting accepted. And so that was my path to Bellevue Literary Review. And I also had like just, some connections, like you've heard, like Bellevue is this iconic hospital that, it just seemed like such an appropriate place for something that was about mental health. And also, yeah, that's what I would say about that piece.
That's interesting. So it sounds like you had some connection. Well, your piece wasn't exactly solicited for the Bellevue Literary Review, but you did have sort of a connection there. You used somebody's name that you knew there. And then as a result of that, someone from the Sun read that piece and hooked you up at the Sun. So,
well, right. So that gave me the connection at the Sun. And then just to be clear, like I submitted to the Sun my own essays and poetry for years and got passes, or as one of our Women Who Submit members calls a motivation letter, which I love that framing. So I submitted for years my own work, and then finally I tried this other approach. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And Anita and Cynthia, your work was not, solicited in any way. Cynthia, it sounds like you didn't have any connections with poetry. Anita, you didn't even know who the contest judge was when you submitted the Sun, right? So what made you choose the Sun? And did you submit to other top tier journals at the same time? I think you said you submitted to 6 places and the Sun was one of them. So was this just like your first round of submissions to top tier journals?
To me, right?
Yeah, Anita.
So yeah, I think it was my first round for them. And I sent to a couple contests. Their contest, I think Crazy Horse, 4th genre. I had a budget and I said, okay, this is how much money I'm going to be tossing out into this. And, hoping to get some of that, if I won or got an honorable mention, I would get some of that money. But yeah, I had about 6 or so. I was like, I'm going to just put this out there. And then once the rejections start coming back in, then I'll start to organize and think about my next round. I was in that mode because I think that's so much of how you have to be as a submitter of your work. And this was one because I had a mentor who said, this one is great and it's imminently publishable. I didn't feel I needed to do much more work on it. I had done so much work with her over the last year or two, just trying to get it to finesse to the right place. And so I didn't feel like I had to do any more extra work. I was surprised. That was probably the one time that's ever happened, but yeah. So
it was picked up in your first round?
Surprisingly, yes. Yes.
That's the dream.
The first and only time. Cynthia, what you're talking about with yours, I really felt for you because I have another piece called Bhangra that I've been trying to get out for 2 years now. And it's funny, but also heartbreaking. And it's me trying to connect to my culture in doing Indian dance. And I think it's fantastic. And I had so many people who didn't like it. And a lot of parts was because I get to a point where I talk about cultural appropriation, which was literally happening in front of me. And a lot of people said to me, oh, take that out, take it out. And I had one friend, she is a Latina poet, and she was like, no, you got to keep that in. And I thought, okay, I'm keeping it in. And I was so grateful because it finally got out in the offing recently. And honestly, I feel that was a situation where, similar to what you're saying, Hazel, I know the editor-in-chief, and I wrote to her myself because we had been in a residency together. And I said, I have something. This has gotten, this has been a finalist for a contest, didn't get published, but it was a finalist. Would you consider it? And she was like, okay, just send it through and we'll see. And that did mean a lot. Like, that helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. And Cynthia, you said that you had started submitting your poem in 2010, and it wasn't until 2019 that you decided to submit to poetry. And you had not submitted this poem to poetry before. Is that right? Or had you revised it?
I'm not sure if I had before. I might have, because it is, so essentially what happened last year is I feel like I have to correct something I said earlier. I was like, oh, I don't submit a lot. But what I don't submit a lot to are literary magazines, but I submit to contests and then full-length book contests. So usually that's where I focus my energy, because I feel like that's more important to me in my career as a writer personally. So I usually submit to contests and then full-length book. So right now, my second book is under review, and it's been sort of like in discussion since last year. So because of that, I know that when you're getting ready to like potentially publish a second book, you should try to get some of the poems that are in there published and get traction. My second book is actually the first book I wrote. It's my baby. It's what I've continued to work on and revised. And because it's so in-depthly about being Salvadorian American and immigration and class and matriarchy, all these things, it's really taken me, I've had to sort of grow with the book in order to be able to finish it. So I started sending out last year again, like batches from that book that I created, several batches to promote, try to get poem publications for that book to promote it. What was interesting about that is that it was weird. Like, when they responded to me, it kind of seemed like someone did try to reject it. I don't know how to explain it. But then I got a personal message from someone at Poetry who said that they really loved that poem and wanted to make sure that that poem was like published. So that's what I thought it was like an acceptance, but it almost felt like this one person was like willing to fight for this poem kind of thing, right? It took a long time. They accepted, I got an acceptance last year in April. So almost a year later, the poem was published in Poetry magazine. And I almost felt like that again had to do with the fact my poem's about a village in El Salvador. It's about being in my grandpa's house and cleaning a pila, which if you've never been to Central America, you probably don't know what a pila is. And I have to sort of try to describe it in the poem. It's a concrete basin where we store water, because we don't have running water in the village. So it's I felt like they kept almost saying, like, when I would email them to say, oh, what's going on with the poem? Like months later, nothing's going on. I'm not hearing anything. And they'd be like, oh, well, we're just trying to find like the issue that's going to be a good fit. And so I felt like I was still hitting that barrier because my poem is so culturally specific and different from what Poetry magazine does regularly.
Wow. Yeah. So it took you about a year between the acceptance and the publication. How long did it take before you got the acceptance? Like, how long was that process between sending it out and hearing from them?
I got the acceptance in August, and I sent to them during Poetry Month in April.
Okay. So 4 months. What about you, Hazel? How long did it take for you to hear back from, I guess, both Bellevue and the Sun after you'd been solicited? How long did it take for you to be accepted? And then how long after the acceptance were your pieces published?
Yeah, so I was actually mapping out the timeline to just kind of see this in preparation for the panel today. Bellevue, I think it took probably like 6 to 9 months to hear back from them. And then I heard from the Sun in 2011 after they'd read the Bellevue piece that was in fall 2009. Then over the years, I submitted multiple times other essays, poems got passed. I began the interview that ultimately was published in 2014. And I really had the Sun in mind to submit to there. But I began that interview and it took me forever because I'd never done an interview. I didn't know to use a transcription service. I was like slogging away, like word by word, transcribing myself. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I just was giving it a shot. And then I did a reconnect because like I had my second child and that really turned my world upside down. So I paused on the interview and then I reconnected with my subjects about 4 years later. And so I took up the interview again. I got updates from him and then I submitted it to the Sun. So I sent that to the Sun in December of 2018. I went to AWP in March of 2019 and I actually got to meet my Sun contact there. And I hadn't heard anything about the interview. So I kind of mentioned it to her. She's like, oh yeah, I think Finn has that. Yeah, you should be hearing. We really liked that piece. And I was like, okay. And then it wasn't until August that I got my acceptance. But it was kind of a qualified acceptance. They said, we have some follow-up questions. Would you be willing to ask those? So I said, of course. And I sat down with Jared, my interview subject again. We followed up on those questions. And then I began the process of working with the editor a little bit more. And then it was published in June 2020. So from December 2018 to June 2020, but of course the interview itself began in 2014. So a lot of time, like Cynthia was saying, like a lot of time and just not getting discouraged or getting discouraged and then pushing past it.
So even after the solicitation in 2011, I think you sent other pieces to the Sun that were not accepted.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I've sent probably 6 or 7 submissions to them that were passed on.
Mm-hmm. Anita, so for contests, usually, they have probably a little bit more of a concrete timeline that you can expect to hear back from, or you can expect publication. And you're smiling, so maybe not.
Because sometimes they don't follow that.
Yeah.
Especially right now. I don't know if any of you are doing that right now. I have a few places that are saying like, we will be letting you know now. And I'm like, what's going on? But with this contest, I submitted in January. I think I heard back around 4 months. To find out that, that it not only, I would say in 3 months, I found out it was a finalist. In 4 months, I found out that it won. And then it took about 6 months after that for it to be published.
Okay, so that's actually the shortest timeline for anyone here. In 6 months. Yeah, I mean, you have to wait a while. So I guess that goes to another question, since such a long time passes between acceptance and publication, and then for some of you between the time you even started your piece to the time that it was published and other people are finally reading it and responding to it, what was the response to your piece and how do you feel about it, or how did you feel about it by the time it was published? We'll start with we go with Cynthia.
Okay, so there's so many things. So one of them is that, this poem is part of my second book. My second book even won like a prize that wasn't a book prize. It's weird. It was like a prize that was like it was dormant and they redid it again. And it was a border prize. So only people who were like living in border states, both in Mexico and in the US, could apply. And I was the winner for the US side, and it was an amazing prize. I got paid like $2,000. They flew me out to Juarez. We did readings in Juarez and El Paso. It was awesome. UTEP was like, right? So the poem, the work I believe in, right? But it wasn't getting published in these individual magazines. And then I felt like it was kind of a hassle with Poetry Magazine because I kept emailing them because they wouldn't give me a timeline. I had to ask them what was going on with the poem. And honestly, I felt like it came out this year in the June or July issue, like just came out. So I almost felt like they at this point were like, oh, it's been a year that we told like this person, like it's been a long time since we told this person that that we were accepting their poems. So I think maybe they just felt like, oh, we should put it out. Honestly, that's how I feel. And the only difference for me has been that people have reached out to me like, oh, I got my issue of Poetry Magazine and congrats, like I'm really happy to see your name in it. And those people have been women and women of color who have reached out to me and are people I already know, have known for a long time, and they got their issue of Poetry Magazine and saw me in it. So that's the only difference, and that's really cool to get that recognition. And for also people who probably identify with me as a woman and woman of color to see me in the magazine. And I think that that is probably the most important thing, while at the same time I was published in Poetry Magazine while all of the uprising is happening and there's this movement against Poetry Magazine, right, for the same issues that like I've never been published in it before, right? So it's such a tumultuous time to be published in Poetry Magazine. So I think I was just like, oh, the issue's finally out. I don't even know if because everything was going on, if I posted. And then just to add to it, I never got my contributors' copies. I had to email them to tell them that I still didn't have them after they told me they were mailing them, and then they sent them to me after. So I didn't even get the issue. Everyone had the issue and I didn't have it. So it was just that.
It sounds like maybe you didn't have a super great experience with publishing in poetry. I am curious though, and I will ask all of you, were you compensated? And if so, are you willing to share how much you were paid for the publication?
Oh,
for the
yeah.
magazine? I
forgot I was paid too because everything was so slow. Yes, so I was compensated. And so my poem, if you, I saw that it was posted, the link in the chat. My poem's like a little tiny thing, like 12 lines, really like densely packed lyric poem. And I got paid $300 for it. So I was compensated for the poem, and that's definitely different, right? In the top tier magazine, right? Versus a smaller magazine, right? Getting compensated for it.
Yeah, it does make a difference. Anita, how, let's see, sorry, I got a little bit mixed up here. So what was the response from I know yours was also quite recent. What was the response that you got? How did you feel about it? How much were you paid for it?
It was, yeah, sure. So since it was a contest, I won $1,500, and, you know, the gods are funny, and, you know, they were like immediately like, let's make it so that her gas gauge doesn't work well on her truck. And so it was like, there goes the money. And so that's where it went. And, you know, that's okay. I was really excited for like the validation, I think, of getting into this and getting selected. I had a pretty positive response from a lot of family and friends. A lot of people bought the journal, or you know, a lot of my family was like, where can I find it? And, you know, it's not online, I can't click on it. So I had to explain that. And they were really, it was a very warm response, especially from my mother. I was very nervous about that. And she actually, it almost felt like she was more validated in understanding me and my identity by having it published. It was a very interesting thing. Don't worry, I'm working on it on a memoir. And after that, I was solicited by Juxtaprose Journal about submitting something. I submitted something, they rejected it. And I've submitted a few times to them now and they've rejected it. However, they've sent me these messages saying, listen, we're aware you've written to us, you've submitted to us a few times, and we've appreciated your work. Please continue to send to us. So I feel like the yes is somewhere in there, you know, just like Hazel with the sun, just waiting for it.
Yeah, just not that instant gratification that I know is so delicious to us. So Hazel, what has the response been to your interview, and how have you felt about it? And how much were you paid for yours?
Yeah. All right. So I was paid $1,250 for the interview, and that was definitely my biggest payday as a writer. So possibly my only payday as a writer. Can't remember. Yeah. So that was amazing to learn how much I was going to get. And so the response was probably the sweetest part of all of it. My interview is about this practice that I learned in my first years of teaching called counsel. It's a storytelling practice, sitting in a circle, using a talking piece, speaking and listening from the heart. And it's just like, it's something that is so deeply restorative and healing and helps open up space for compassion. So when it got published, the Sun started sending me and my subject like written responses that were coming into the Sun. And they were like saying, in this time of unrest, this interview couldn't be more hopeful and promising, and this is what the world needs. And like, that's how I feel about the practice. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. So to hear readers say like that it was really giving them something that they needed, that it felt like it was timely and important, that was incredible. And then I had like I had one response that gave me a correction on something I had put in my introduction. And so I got to respond to her. And then, so it was published in June. The Sun almost said, they said to me initially, yeah, we're thinking about publishing in June. I'm like, great. And then they came back to me and they said, because of pandemic, we're going to just shift our entire model for June. We're going to do something totally different. And I was like, no. And then they came back and they said, actually, we are going to publish in June. So there was a little yo-yo there. And then in August, they printed the letters from readers in their letters to the editor. So that was really cool, because then people actually said, oh my gosh, I didn't know you had published until I read the letter that was in the Sun. So the response has been really, really great. Yeah.
Sounds like you kind of got like a little bit of a too far in terms of the recognition from the Sun, right? Not only your piece, but then also the letters. And they tried to continue their relationship with you by like sending you all the positive feedback that your piece got.
Yeah, I was really impressed with that piece. That was totally unexpected. And it made me feel like, you know, I was really hearing from readers.
That's great. So I know our session is going to be ending at 12:15. I want to make sure that we have time for all the questions that people have. Some people have already posted in the Q&A. I see 3 questions in there. If you do have any questions, please post in the Q&A, because it's I'm not sure I'm going to be able to scroll back in the chat and pick up everyone's question. So just in the Q&A would be great. And then let me just go around one final time before we start with the questions. If there's anything else that our panelists would like to add, is there anything that you want to say about this process or about your piece, or just, you know, anything you want to say that you haven't been able to say? Cynthia?
I think the only thing is something I posted in the sneak peek video was, does it change your life to publish in a top tier magazine? In my personal experience, being published in poetry at this point, obviously the issue just came out. I don't know, someone's going to read it later and, you know, call me about it, right? But in my personal experience, I don't feel that it really, aside from getting paid for the poem, which is nice, right? I don't really feel like it's made a difference for me. And so really just questioning to ourselves, like, why we want to be, that's the thing that I've been thinking about, questioning to ourselves why we want to be in this magazine, in the magazines, right? Are we reading material in these magazines that we love, that we want to be in a conversation with? Or are we just publishing in them because it's like poetry, you know, and it's called poetry, right? And kinds of things, that situation. So I guess just, I definitely try to be a little bit more strategic now with where I sent out. And in this case, I was trying to promote the book. And so that's why I sent there, right? And so that is good, right? So it's just something to think about. Why are we sending to them, right?
Yeah, it's a good question to ask ourselves. Thank you, Cynthia. Hazel, is there anything else you want to share?
I want to connect to something that Cynthia mentioned. I think that what's really helpful about publishing in, you know, anywhere, but also in these top tier things, is it then becomes this kind of like entry to connection with other places or other people. So Cynthia talked about like, I'm wanting to publish this book. I'm going to send these poems out for submission. And then when I'm trying to publish this book, I reference these poems have been published here, 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 and here. Look at all these other gatekeepers who are saying yes to my work. So I think the names and that personalization is really helpful. So that was something, and like even mentioning like this was a finalist in these other places. Like I didn't do that with a collection I sent out, and I should have. So I think that's a really great tip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, always. Yeah, I mean, even for my own, the piece that I mentioned in the beginning, the Vita review, was solicited. So shout out to the Vita review. Anita, anything else you'd like to add?
No, yeah, just echoing like what Cynthia said. I do think that since getting published in Iowa Review, it didn't really change too much. It felt like a feather in my cap, but honestly, I don't think it would have changed anything else that has happened since then. I was awarded a Fulbright Fellowship for this last year, and I was doing it in fiction though, and it was great. I had to come back in March because of coronavirus, because I was in Spain, and you know, and it was great because the woman I was researching died of the plague. So I felt like I really was experiencing it. But I'm just saying that the publication, I don't think would have really, I don't think that was the make or break of it. I agree that with Cynthia that I really feel like it means more if you're getting published in places where you're really passionate about all the work that's getting published there, that you really love the editorial board, that you really love the other writing you've seen there. And that's a really exciting thing, to get to see your writing with other writers that you've really loved and admired more than anything else.
Yeah, that's a great, I mean, that sort of goes to Cynthia's question too, to all of us, like, why are we submitting these things? Like, why are we choosing the places that we're choosing? So I am now going to go to some questions, and we have a lot of attendee questions. First one here, well, not the very first one, but how much editing did you do on your piece before you submitted? So I know, Cynthia, you said you had done micro edits over the years. Anita, I think you said you had worked with someone for over a year. Is that right? It had pretty much been edited before you ever sent it out. And then Hazel, what about you?
Yeah, so my Bellevue piece, I worked on in workshop. I edited a lot. I really spent a lot of time on that. And then my son interview, I also did a lot of editing because I had so much content and I really had to trim down a substantial amount of it. So that took, you know, years in that particular piece. And then even when the Sun accepted, then there was edits from the editors at the Sun. So there was a fair amount of back and forth.
There are several questions about contest versus non-contest submissions. So can you all speak to, Cynthia, you've been mentioned that contests are main mode of submission, that and books, right? So what's the difference to you between contests and journal submissions, regular submissions, and why do you select one versus the other? And this is to everyone.
So one thing I think about with the journals is a lot of these top tier magazine journals are not online and they're subscription only. And part of that is something I think about when I send to them, is that who's going to be the readership, right? And a lot of them, the subscriptions aren't necessarily that cheap either, right? So it's just thinking about who's the readership, who's the audience for the pieces is something I think about. But mostly with my submissions for the prizes, I'm thinking about my return, right? In terms of my effort. And usually I'll submit to like contests, fellowships, books, right? Different things. Like I was a finalist for the National Poetry Series. That was a big deal for me, right? Obviously I wish I had the dough, but I don't. But it's still a really big deal. And so submitting to things where the return is going to be something that I can really do something with, right? And like $2,000, and what does that mean, right? The value of that. That also doesn't mean I send out to everything, because that's also really expensive, right? So I'm really particular with the contest I do send out to. ones that seemed fit for, like, I submitted to one that was, you had to be living in a border state, right? In the Southwest, and you had to, so obviously that's something that's more niche, right? Most of the people who submitted to that were Latinx, right? And then it was like connected with UTEP and things like that. So I am a bit more strategic and specific, not just strategic, but very specific with the contests I do send to. And even the presses I send to now. Before I used to send to a lot of different book prizes, and I don't do that anymore, just because over the years, just like thinking about what does that do, right? And even now with the second book, I'm not really doing prizes anymore. I'm not sending out, I've been talking with presses individually, like university presses, versus doing a prize for it.
Thank you. Hazel, what's your experience been with contests versus regular submissions?
So I think contests, I get really excited when I see who's judging. And I'm like, if there's a chance that this work could be read by this person, like that right there feels like a win. So I just submitted to Bellevue again for their prize, their Bellevue Literary Prize, because a writer I admire was going to be reviewing it. And I've done that with several books. It's like this motivation factor that drives me in that. And then sometimes, like, I saw some questions about like getting paid versus not getting paid. Sometimes there's a piece of work that just feels really timely and I don't want to wait. I want it to get out there. And so I'm going to then target places that are not as competitive, maybe a place that I already have a relationship with. Like Rising Phoenix Review was a really wonderful place that would publish kind of quickly. It's online, it's accessible. So that's one of the factors I consider.
I see. It's a question for the panelists. Do you expand the audience for your voice by publishing in top tier, or do you push for BIPOC women and their, I don't know how to pronounce this, BIPOC, my bad, women editors and their journals to have a wider audience?
So I guess I'm just doing it hoping that it diversifies, right? And that's why I'm sending there. Usually I send to any top tier magazine just expecting a rejection, expecting that whoever's reading it are all those young, you know, white graduate students I see at AWP as the face of these magazines, right? So I'm not necessarily expecting a response that's going to be positive, but I am sending, I think, thinking about Vida Count, thinking about Latinx authors, and that, yes, I write for my community, but it doesn't mean only my community can react or respond or learn from what I write.
Anita?
You know, honestly, when I submitted to the top tier, it was mostly because my mentor was like, you need an agent. And I feel like the best way for you to do it is to try to win a few contests. She felt like my work was good and that would help me to get an agent to come to me. Just to let you know, it hasn't happened yet. I'm still available. But I hadn't been thinking, I hadn't been considering all of that. I do have to say that when my piece got accepted at Iowa Review, the first thing that happened was, in the contest situation, it doesn't get looked at by the judges until the second round. The first round is the managing editorial board of the journal. And so I was still going through the Iowa Review standard editors, and the nonfiction editor is half Asian, half white. So I didn't realize that she had her own feelings about identity, that the piece really hit her, that it really connected to her very much, that she chose that as one of the several finalists for the nonfiction category. So I feel that, you know, that was a bit of a positive to know that there are more diversified editors out there, that they are giving a voice to a wider range of individuals.
Thank you, Anita. What about you, Hazel, your thoughts?
I think that this is a time to call editors to task and say, I'm sure that your magazine is looking for more diverse voices. I'm sure that your readers are interested in hearing from BIPOC writers and women. So I think that's something that we all can name as we query. It's definitely something that concerns me as I spent a lot of time with the Sun magazine. I noticed there was a lot of room that could still be made for more diverse voices. So still something to really push. And I think in this time right now, naming that could be really powerful.
So self-identifying basically in your cover letter even. Interesting. So I'll have one final question for the panelists. How do you cultivate patience and persistence in the face of rejection, repeated rejection? Do you ever get angry? How do you cope? Is it just all part of the game? Let us know your thoughts. Cynthia?
So this, I think, goes back to what I did say at the beginning about not submitting, is that what I do instead of submitting is I write. That's really how I cultivate like that for me, because usually I'm motivated by an idea or a project I'm working on, and that to me is how I feel that time, right? And knowing that there's something I'm pouring my heart into, something that I'm researching, something that I'm revising, those things are really important to me. And so that's what I do instead of submitting. So I feel like I go through these phases where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like do it. I feel like I always shame myself about submitting. I'm like, you're terrible at this, you never do it. So sit down, you're gonna do it, right? And then I do it, and that happens maybe for like a 3-month period, 3 or 4 month period, right? I'm submitting, trying to submit a lot, and then I won't submit again for the rest of the year unless there's a prize I really see. But in the meantime, what I'm doing is writing, and that is how I feel that time. Like I'm not sitting there waiting by the phone per se, right, for the response. I'm just working on my projects and trying to stay motivated to write, even if I haven't been writing. For example, in this situation, as I said in the video that was shared, like I haven't been writing because of the pandemic and the uprising and my emotional state, but instead, so I read poetry, and that was what I did instead. I read books, right?
Sorry, I was muted. What about you, Anita?
I have to be honest, when I got the Fulbright Fellowship, I became the laziest I've ever been, and I didn't do anything. I actually found that getting accepted actually made things worse for me, because I was like, I have a Fulbright Fellowship, and for the next like 6 months or so, I did nothing. And I actually I think you get to a point with rejections that you start to appreciate it, where there's a moment where it's not as, you're not as upset anymore. It actually kind of feels more, you get more driven, and you actually feel more like, a more of a sense of urgency of I have to get this out there. And I think that appreciating rejection in that way, like looking at it, first of all, is it's not the end all be all, and it's only one place. It allows you to, I mean, not only just develop a thicker skin, but when you're going back to the work that got rejected, you start finessing it, you start changing it, revising it, and it becomes something so much better than what you imagined it to be. And the other thing that really helped me this year was I had to keep telling myself this, I still have to, is that my self-worth isn't measured by my productivity. So my self-worth is not measured by my publications. My self-worth as a writer is not measured by what accomplishments I have. You know, once I started realizing, because we live in such a competitive capitalist place, it's hard to get out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that a lot of people struggle with, a lot of writers, a lot of perfectionists. Hazel, what about you? How do you cope?
Yeah, so I stay in the process. I keep writing. My life as a writer is about the process and what the work does for me on a daily basis. So I agree with what Anita said there. And community. So staying with the writing and then staying in community. And being reminded that when I get a pass on something, then I just turn it around and I can send it somewhere else. I'm not always great at that, but yeah, that just, you've got to keep writing and not let those rejections determine your process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much to you all, Anita and Cynthia and Hazel, for sharing your experiences and your thoughts in this panel. It's been really, really great to hear all of you. So September 12th is going to be the annual Women Who Submit Submission Blitz. On September 5th, you can start preparing your submissions using the links to top tier journals that will be posted on our public Facebook page. So there's 2 Women Who Submit Facebook, I don't know, one is, I was going to say pages, but one is a page and it's public and the other one is a private group. So look at the public page. We're going to be posting the top tier journals with open submission periods there, and be sure to check out their guidelines and get your work ready to submit. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Thank you.